Students, welcome to UNESCO's Right to Education tour. You might be thinking, what makes a right to education even mean? For many of us, education feels an everyday fact of life, something we take for granted. However, access to education is still a major challenge in many parts of the world. Millions of people, especially girls and women, have never even set a foot in a classroom. Just think of the woman in your life. Imagine your mothers, sisters, teachers, or peers being unable to receive an education just because of their gender. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and UNESCO defines education as a fundamental right. This isn't just an obvious statement. It represents decades of efforts to make education a guaranteed right for everyone, regardless of the background or social standing. In many nations, especially rural areas and countries in Africa and Asia, millions of women and girls have never set a foot in a school. Think of the woman in your life, mother, sisters, teachers, and peers, and consider that many of them cannot access education just because of their gender.
At a global level, UNESCO organizes international conferences and establishes agreements, such as the Convention Against Discrimination in Education, to ensure equality in access to education. Similarly, in Mexico, the Nueva Escuela Mexicana is an initiative aimed at making education more inclusive and aligned with international standards, but its implementation is still a work in progress. In Mexico, Article 3 of the Constitution guarantees free, secular, and compulsory education. This legal framework is a cornerstone, but in practice, significant challenges remain.
Globally, 263 million children lack access to education, and there are still enormous disparities in developing countries.
The General Education Law and the Law of the Rights of Children and Adolescents work together to ensure access to education, particularly for vulnerable groups. However, implementing these laws continues to face hurdles, especially in rural and indigenous areas.
Education is a fundamental human right. It's a right that transforms lives. Over the past few decades, the Education for All movement has aimed to ensure universal basic education, but challenges persist. In Mexico, although primary school enrollment is high, educational inequality remains a major concern, especially in rural areas. The 2019 education reform sought to address these gaps by focusing on teacher training and updating curricula. However, much work remains to be done. Exani 2 test results show significant disparities in reading comprehension and mathematical reasoning, with urban students performing better than those from marginalized communities. The National Institute for Adult Education, INEA, in Mexico has implemented literacy programs for adults, but social and economic barriers continue to prevent many adults from continuing their education. Globally, countries like Finland have made significant progress in educational quality through a focus on continuous teacher training and equality in resources across all regions. In comparison, Mexico must continue to improve the implementation of its reforms and policies, especially in rural areas.
Now, let's talk about Mexico. Every day throughout the country, around 26 million students in basic education, almost 15 million students in secondary and higher education, and 2 million teachers at all levels are involved in the field of Mexican public education. a feat that has been repeated year after year since 1921. The pillar of this effort over the years has been the third constitutional article that emerged in 1917. The education provided by the state must be free and secular. Two principles of democratic exercise that have contributed to the training of millions of workers, technicians, and professionals throughout the country for decades. Another complementary effort has been the free textbook. The first copies for primary school began to be distributed in 1960. The free textbooks were attacked by the most conservative sectors of the Catholic Church. Some businessmen in the paper and publishing industries, the most extreme groups of the National Action Party, and parent organizations linked the clergy with the pretext that they were doctrinary and even communist. President Adolfo López Mateos defended with the thesis of democratic equality and national unity.
When asked if they were only going to be for public schools or also for private schools, he said they are all children. They are all Mexicans. In order to constitute ourselves as Mexicans, we had to share a history, a territory, a culture. In this defense, he had the support of the National Union of Educators Workers that had been founded 20 years earlier, in 1943. The free textbook has been to date a great effort by Mexican state to teach all children and reduce family expenses in education.
Once upon a time, a little girl searched for hope, for life, for school. With her school bag on her back, she ran toward the river, where she could hear life all around her. The path to school is filled with obstacles: poverty, insecurity, and lack of transportation. In many communities in Mexico, children walk several kilometers every day to get to school. However, education remains a powerful tool for change. In Mexico, programs like scholarships and rural teacher training are essential to ensure that every child, regardless of their circumstances, has the chance to learn and grow. Education in Mexico also faces challenges related to infrastructure. Despite progress, many schools still lack basic resources, and the traditional educational model has proven insufficient to address the country's diverse contexts. Globally, countries like Japan and South Korea have achieved high educational standards thanks to well-funded public policies and equality in access.
It all begins with a little girl, a student full of dreams. Beside her, a balloon floats in the air, light but constant. This balloon is not just any object. It is knowledge, education, the opportunity to learn. As the girl walks to school, the balloon follows her, like a promise, like a right that belongs to her. But education is not something that stays in one place. It's shared, it expands, it multiplies. As the girl advances, the balloon begins to move. It no longer follows only her, but it meets new people along the way. It passes by a teacher who, with his voice and his teachings, propels it even further. It reaches a group of students who touch it, hold it, and suddenly
It's no longer just a balloon. It's an idea, a future, an opportunity. It continues to float. No, it's with young people who share their learning, with adults who never stop seeing knowledge, with communities that believe in the power of education. But the balloon also faces obstacles. Sometimes the wind pushes it in the wrong direction. There are those who try to stop it, who believe that knowledge is not for everyone, but education is resilient. The balloon keeps going stronger, bigger, more full of life. And then the circle repeats itself. A new child, a new generation, a new opportunity. Education is not just a right, it's a bridge between the present and the future, between the desire to learn and the possibility of changing the world. Because when knowledge is shared, no one is left behind.
Can't keep my hands to myself.